Well, thank you very much, Catherine and the panel, for a very interesting session, and fits very nicely with the theme of the entire event, which is, of course, resilience. And resilience is a phenomenally important word to get to grips with. It's the capacity to recover quickly from disruption. It has a sense of elasticity, bounce back ability, the resources to withstand shock or shocks, repeated shocks. It's connected to the concept of diversity. You improve your capacity to be resilient if you have a range of options, if your capacity is enhanced by your connection with others who bring their own resources to you in order to enable you to respond effectively to risk. And it requires the management of complexity. It doesn't dodge complexity. It faces up to the fact that we live in a complex world, a world that is increasingly difficult to manage, and we need ways of organizing our response, building our capacities to deal with complexity without pretending that there are simple solutions. Resilience is a useful concept for understanding how one might change the way we do things. Even in the context of international trade, liberalized international trade, commerce in its old form, it needs resilience in order to be a useful companion to the concept of efficiency. Trade is far more than comparative advantage or producing cheaper units because you have greater scale. Trade connects us, connects our human society in many, many ways, and allows us to build up our capacity to engender peace and security, to confront abuse of power, to find ways of managing a complex threat like climate change or loss of biodiversity. We shouldn't be seeing international trade merely as a means to reduce unit costs or improve efficiency, important though that is for prosperity. But prosperity itself is a bigger idea than efficiency, and resilience and prosperity are companions as well. Judith Rodin, in her book, The Resilience Dividend, drew out that capacity for, once you understand the need for resilience, you find other values, you find other ways of increasing your economy or your society's ability to solve other problems. It's a mode of thinking that helps you find solutions. John Elkington, in his wonderful book, Green Swans, he uses resilience as a kind of staging post. Again, a decision-making formula, if you like, a way of dealing with complexity in order to find a more effective way of managing a business. Resilience helps you organize a business response to risk. It asks different questions of you and of your colleagues, but it's also a stepping stone towards a more demanding idea, namely regeneration, regenerative agriculture, regenerative industrial production. Very few enterprises have reached that stage, but they probably won't get there, and we need to in many parts of our economy, because of our requirement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and live within the boundaries that have been set by the physical systems which we are a part of. But John's idea is you work through resilience in order to get to regeneration. And if you're going to successfully manage this risk, you're going to need better data. You're going to need different metrics. The insurance industry knows this so very well and has known it for a very long time, that the data that they have had to understand and manage risk is constantly altered by the real world fact of climate change. We've known this, it's just been very difficult to affect or change our behavior sufficiently to put us in a place where we factor in climate change in the way we evaluate risk day to day. That risk is also non-linear risk. It isn't smooth. It isn't a nice, gentle curve. It disrupts. it jolts, and it sometimes produces a collapse, a catastrophic risk. It always involves harm to people. And one of the things we've got to do with the concept of resilience is constantly connect the effect of these physical disruptions with the disruptions on people's lives and the society and communities in which they live. One of the things I learned very on by working with people in the insurance industry on climate change is that not only do we have to cope with non-linear risk, but we have to confront the awful injustice of uninsurable risk. Way back in the late 80s, when I first started working on climate change, and with my colleagues building an alliance of small island states from all of the oceans, we commissioned some work from the late and much missed Professor David Pearce at University College London to look at the question of insurance. And we learned that many of the small island states that formed the basis of AOSIS simply could not get insurance for vital needs in their economy. So much of the infrastructure, the tourism industry, canneries, ports, all of these things are at the coastal margin. They're all vulnerable to sea level rise. They're all vulnerable to hurricanes and typhoons and various other manifestations of the physical risks of climate change. And so we asked David to help us figure out how we could best represent the interests of the small island states, which in turn, I might add, is the interests of us all, by figuring out an insurance scheme for them. And he said, okay, what's the most certain part of the scientific agenda? And we said it's sea level rise. It's measurable, it's incremental, it can be tracked over time, it varies regionally, but let's focus on sea level rise. And then he said, well, let's have a look at the per capita emissions of countries. Let's track all the usual data associated with emissions, and let's build an insurance pool that is essentially a responsibility pool for those who cause the climate change problem to be ready to pay out to those who are victims. And so we designed this insurance idea around those two parameters: sea level rise, greenhouse gas emissions. Those who cause the problem pay into a pool accessible to those who are victims and who need relatively rapid access to that money in order to sustain their economies and their societies. Absolutely no chance of success negotiating that into the Framework Convention on Climate Change. We tried very hard in the period of 1990 to 92, but thinking back, there's something remarkably clear and clean and simple about that notion that remains relevant. It'll just have to be done in another way, through other structures that understand the base unfairness of the situation that a small island state finds itself in, a community finds itself in, vulnerable to climate change, unable to respond on its own terms, requiring the help of others, but in every sense of the word, connected to us. So that brings me to COP26. I've spent that whole 30 years working on climate, a bit more than that now, working on climate change and persevering with these multilateral negotiations, which occasionally seem just too big, too unwieldy, incapable of resolving these complex problems. But somehow or other, you've just got to stick in and make them work. And this year, of course, we, the UK, are presidents of COP26. It's a weird one, delayed, postponed, but there is embedded in that, in the themes, the campaigns of COP26, adaptation and resilience. And it is connected to the essentially just arguments of those most vulnerable to climate change. And built into that campaign is something you know about, the race to resilience. The race to resilience, which is led by the Climate Champions team, Nigel Topping and his colleagues. And that race to resilience allows many non-state actors, companies, civil society organizations, sub-federal states and cities, communities to participate in a program of action. They don't do it as individuals, they have to do it through associations and alliances, but there are 4 P's that they've got to pay attention to: pledge, plan, proceed, publish. They're all devices for encouraging a form of collaboration that is necessary in order to find the range of solutions which we know are there to build resilience, to adapt to the physical consequences, the harsh realities of climate change, but also to adapt communities to thrive and prosper, notwithstanding that risk and that threat, to find ways of carrying on and continuing to maintain their culture and their community despite the physical risk. There's also a sense that the campaigns can build resilience to the transition risk as well, the fact that we're going to change our business models, the way we reward the enterprises that are essential to our prosperity. The transition risks are significant and relevant to resilience, just as the physical risks are. And one of the ways I'm most interested in this race to resilience is how it connects to other themes and campaigns in the COP26 agenda. In nature, the campaign to properly value nature, to use other devices like carbon pricing and public policy incentives to channel capital into natural solutions to climate change. They fit very well with resilience. If you're trying to build up the resilience of your coastal zone by planting mangroves at scale, and we have projects of that nature that are already being funded, you are performing multiple functions all at once. You're drawing carbon down out of the atmosphere, sequestering it in living organisms. You're building up resilience to sea level rise and storm surges. You're encouraging the fishing communities to thrive because the mangroves themselves are wonderful nurseries for marine life. They go together. They're a way of properly valuing natural capital in a way that supports the resilience of a community and an economy. And there will be a very deliberate attempt to bring these themes together during COP26 and offer a platform for governments, companies, investors, civil society representatives to show off their solutions, to show the range and diversity of solutions that are there, but need to be scaled, that need to be brought to the attention of many, to encourage a response that is effective to the scale of risk that climate change presents. And there's already been an adaptation summit earlier in the year. The president, Alok Sharma, is very keen to move these ideas forward with a focus on the most vulnerable, again, for good reasons of self-interest. If we pay adequate attention to the most vulnerable, we are much more likely to protect ourselves from the risk of climate change. We're much more likely to take seriously the need to act and do so in a hurry. And ultimately, an event like this should enable us to facilitate and enable a greater flow of capital, a greater flow of financial resources as well as technological and human resources into the solutions to climate change. And that really, in the end, is a way of making better connection between ourselves and our enterprises. I've always loved the great quote from Ian Forster, only connect, the prose and the passion, no longer live in fragments. I've always loved that idea of connecting in order to avoid living in fragments. And here we are in a year of COVID and feeling ever more vulnerable. It's important to know that we can connect and that we can do so very deliberately and purposefully, drawing upon the resources of the full range of our solutions in law, policy, finance, and technology, and to do it with conviction. And now I'm going to hand over to Susan Caldwell for the wrapping up section. Thank you very much.
Hello again, everyone, and thank you very much to James for your inspiring and concluding speech. It's a really fitting end to 2 days of rich discussion. Some of my reflections from across the 2 days, I've been really interested to hear about the connectivity between natural disasters, climate change, pandemic, cyber and supply chains when we consider our resilience. It's a global challenge that matters to cities, to companies, businesses and to individuals. I've heard lots of discussion about the roles of government on regulation, data and disclosure, building frameworks, convening, pooling insurance, and bringing sectors together to build solutions. Of course, as part of government, we'll look forward to considering and reflecting on those and what we need to do to help the global resilience challenges. Over the last 2 days, and particularly today, we've explored how innovation in technology and risk modelling can help quantify what were seemingly intangible risks and develop a range of new products that suit the changing profile of resilience needs. If I could reshare two of my favourite forward-looking quotes across the 2 days. So firstly, today, Jonathan Jackson of Provisco, I loved his phrase, looking forward, that resilience will be de facto. And yesterday, right at the start, John Neal, CEO of Lloyds, saying that we need to now move from thought leadership to action leadership. And that's good for us to think about looking forward. So thank you to you for posing questions to our panels and completing the polling. Please continue to do so and continue to visit our partner booths if you want to link in and find out more. There's rich materials available to you. If you want to hear more about how the UK can help you with your resilience challenge, do talk to us. We can connect you to colleagues in embassies around the globe or to one of our partner organisations here today. And if you're a UK-based company who has a resilience solution to offer, come and join us in our year-long programme of activity to showcase what the UK can offer. And we look forward to supporting you and your company in your international growth journey. The sessions, all of the sessions will be available on demand from 1 p.m. GMT tomorrow. So please do go back, review and share any particular sessions that are pertinent to you and your organisation with your colleagues and with your networks. We'd be delighted if you could do that. So finally, on behalf of the UK Government's Department for International Trade, thank you so much for joining us, being part of the debate, and we look forward to working with you in the year ahead. Thank you.